unattended information in the PFC. So the PFC may be important for metacognition, especially for metacognition in perceptual tasks. In tasks not explicitly measuring metacognition, such as the fMRI experiment of blindsight patient GY, or that fMRI experiment using metacontrast masking, PFC activity seems to reflect subjective experience too. Well then, doesn't look so good for the localists if the PFC is important for conscious experience. But a localist might argue that even though some of the tasks did not measure metacognition per se, they were still about how one reflects upon one's experiences. This kind of introspection is unsurprisingly dependent on access, which is why the PFC was involved. In the case of patient GY, it was well established that he was subjectively blind to stimuli in the right visual field. The conscious experience was lacking. In the blind field, he said he was only guessing. We take guessing to mean that he did not consciously see the stimulus, but it is a fair point to say that guessing also reflects a lack of confidence. So ultimately, GY might have had some metacognitive defects in his blind field too. According to the localist argument, this could be why the PFC showed less activity for the stimulus presented to GY's blind field. It wasn't subjective experience, but rather metacognition, which is ultimately a kind of access. So the localist wants to say that the PFC is all about conscious access and attention after all. But this view is independently problematic because we know that even task-irrelevant information enters the PFC. For example, in one study using invasive multi-unit recording of neuronal activity, monkeys performed a task like this. They looked at a mix of red and green moving dots. If the fixation point was a blue cross, the animal had to decide whether the dots were mostly green or mostly red, and respond by making an eye movement to a target on the side to indicate their choice. If the fixation point was a yellow dot, the animals had to decide whether the red and green dots were mostly moving to the left or to the right, and likewise respond by making an eye movement to a target. While the monkeys performed these tasks, the experimenters put electrodes into the prefrontal cortex and recorded the activity from many neurons simultaneously. They found that such activity reflected the choice that the animal was making. But more importantly, the neuronal activity predicted task-irrelevant information too. For example, the motion of the dots when the task was to discriminate color. These kinds of results are often overlooked because in human fMRI, prefrontal bold activity mostly shows task-relevant, not task-irrelevant activity. But as we learned earlier in this course, fMRI is not the most sensitive method for measuring brain activity. In general, null results must be interpreted carefully. In light of the positive findings from the neuronal recordings, it is clear that the PFC is not just about what we attend to or what we consciously access.